Imagine something entering our solar system, not silently, not violently, but deliberately. A traveler from the deep void between stars, moving with such precision, shedding elements so pure and so alien that even our most advanced instruments struggled to believe what they were seeing. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a rumor. This is happening now. And it has a name, 3I Atlas. First spotted as a dim flicker of light racing across the sky at 130,000 miles per hour, it quickly became clear this wasn't just another rock from our galactic neighborhood. It was the third confirmed interstellar object ever observed. But unlike any before it, this one didn't just visit. It spoke, not with signals, not with sound, but with its chemistry, its trajectory, and its impossible behavior. And as the James Webb Space Telescope turned its gaze upon it, the findings would force scientists to confront something far more unsettling than a comet from another star. It was metal, not just any metal, a stream of pure nickel pouring out every second, alone, untouched by iron, a chemical signature that shouldn't exist in the known universe. What is 3I Atlas? A probe? A relic? A warning? In this video, we dive into the mind-bending details that are forcing the scientific community to reconsider the very nature of cosmic visitors, and whether we are truly alone in this galaxy. When scientists pointed the Very Large Telescope toward 3I Atlas, they expected the usual suspects, a mix of water ice, dust, and perhaps a few common elements, just like every other comet we've studied. But what they found sent a shockwave through the astronomical community. The object was shedding 10 pounds of pure nickel every second. That's not a metaphor, it's literal. This kind of purity doesn't occur naturally, not in our solar system, and not in this form. Nickel in space is usually paired with iron, born in the same cataclysmic stellar furnaces. They're like cosmic twins, inseparable. But in this case, the iron was missing, almost entirely. This anomaly wasn't just a chemical curiosity. It was a red flag, and it raised questions that made even seasoned astrophysicists uncomfortable. How do you get pure nickel in space? On Earth, it takes industrial-grade technology to separate nickel from iron, high-temperature processes, massive energy input, and precise machinery. The implication? This wasn't a natural occurrence. It was processed somehow, somewhere by something. And that shifted the narrative entirely. Because in nature, patterns are messy, but purity is intentional. If the chemical composition wasn't enough, its path through the solar system added another layer of mystery. Objects from deep space tend to follow chaotic, loosely influenced paths, bent by the gravitational forces of the sun and nearby planets. But 3I Atlas didn't drift, it navigated. Its trajectory brought it within close proximity to Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, all within a single pass. Statistically, that's beyond rare. One Harvard astrophysicist calculated the probability of such a path happening by random chance, 0.005%. That's like flipping a coin and having it land on its edge, 10 times in a row. And to make things even stranger, 3I Atlas entered the solar system on a retrograde orbit, moving in the opposite direction of the planets, on nearly the same flat orbital plane. That kind of movement isn't just odd, it's efficient. If you wanted to survey the inner solar system quickly, getting flybys of major planets, you'd choose a path exactly like this one. It's not drifting, it's touring. And what's most disturbing is the possibility that this path wasn't just effective, but intentional. The deeper scientists looked, the weirder it got. Most comets are made largely of water ice, often leaving behind beautiful tails as they approach the sun. But not 3I Atlas. Instead of water, its primary ingredient was something far less common, carbon dioxide. In fact, its CO2 to water ratio was 8:1, a figure astronomers had never seen before. Typical comets in our system contain about 4% CO2. This one, over 800% more. That single detail speaks volumes. It means 3I Atlas isn't just chemically strange, it's chemically foreign, not from here. Not from anything we've seen, cataloged, or simulated. And when combined with its metal emissions, the idea starts to form that maybe this isn't a comet at all. Maybe it's a machine, or worse, a signal. Not in the way we think of signals, radio pulses, or blinking lights, but a physical structure with embedded meaning. A message in material, using atomic ratios instead of binary code. And what if we're just beginning to crack its grammar? This isn't the first time the cosmos has sent us something that breaks the rules. In 2017, a long, cigar-shaped object named Oumuamua zipped through the solar system. It moved too fast, had no visible tail, and, just like 3I Atlas, accelerated inexplicably as it exited the sun's influence. That same Harvard professor suggested it could be an artificial solar sail. At the time, many dismissed the idea. Now, with 3I Atlas showing even weirder behavior, the comparisons are impossible to ignore. These aren't just flukes anymore. They're events, linked perhaps by origin, purpose, or creator. Two anomalous visitors in less than a decade, both defying astrophysical expectations, both forcing us to reconsider the boundaries of natural and artificial. The odds of that? Again, astronomically small. Either something is very broken in our understanding of how interstellar objects behave, or something is intentionally placing these breadcrumbs, knowing we're finally advanced enough to notice. And if that's true, if 3I Atlas is the second piece in a larger galactic puzzle, then the real question isn't, what is it, anymore. The real question is, what comes next? As the James Webb Telescope kept tracking 3I Atlas, another strange detail emerged. Not from the chemical composition this time, but from the structure of its tail. Tails, in comets, are reactive. They form when the sun heats the nucleus and ejects gas and dust. The tail always points away from the sun due to solar wind pressure. But 3I Atlas? It wasn't following the rules. Its tail appeared to change orientation, not always away from the sun, but sometimes at precise angles relative to its direction of travel. And here's where it gets truly bizarre. The tail didn't look like it was just dispersing. It looked like it was thrusting. The object's trajectory changes coincided with intensified nickel emissions and slight adjustments in speed, almost like pulses. Like it was using its own material to maneuver, not just react. Imagine that. An object using expelled exotic metals to control its motion, without visible engines, without heat, without sound. Just silent, precise bursts of direction. Not a comet, but a form of deep space propulsion disguised as one. If 3I Atlas were natural, it might contain trace elements of organic compounds. Many comets do, amino acids, carbon chains, even precursors to life. That's part of why we study them, to understand the chemical building blocks of biology across the universe. But with 3I Atlas, no such markers were found. No glycine, no formaldehyde, no methane, no water vapor in significant quantities. Instead, its outgassing consisted almost entirely of metals and CO2, cold, inert, lifeless materials, but in perfect ratios. So perfect, in fact, that one astrophysicist suggested the object had the chemical profile of a manufactured component, not a dirty snowball. This absence of biology was just as loud as a presence. It screamed intention. Because if something out there wanted to send a probe across the stars, would it risk biological contamination? Would it embed life? Or would it send something sterile, tough, precise, and built to last for millennia? 3I Atlas wasn't just lifeless. It was clean, like a device, not a messenger, but the message itself. The deeper the data went, the more frustrating the conclusions became. Some scientists tried to explain everything naturally, odd chemical distribution, solar effects, unknown compositions, but each explanation needed more complexity than the last. And that's the paradox. In science, the simplest model is usually the correct one. Yet every natural model for 3I Atlas grew so convoluted, so unlikely, that they began to resemble design. Think about that. When random processes become so precise that we have to stretch physics to explain them, at what point are we just making excuses for not accepting the obvious? That's when a new idea emerged, not from conspiracy theorists, but from credentialed astrophysicists. What if this wasn't nature mimicking intelligence, but intelligence mimicking nature? Something built to look like a comet, something engineered to blend in, barely. Just enough to be noticed by civilizations advanced enough to see past randomness. Like us, right now. Maybe 3I Atlas didn't want to be found. Or maybe It wanted to be found by us, and only now. Perhaps the most terrifying part of this story isn't what 3I Atlas is, it's when it arrived. Think about it. We're at the peak of our observational capacity. We've launched the James Webb Telescope. We have planet-wide radar systems, near-infrared tracking, AI-assisted spectrometers. And just as our tools became precise enough to notice something this subtle, it showed up. Not a decade earlier, not a century later, right now. That's not a coincidence. That's synchronization. And when you look at the historical timeline, Oumuamua in 2017, Borisov in 2019, and now 3I Atlas, you start to see a pattern, a rhythm, like pulses, like steps, like breadcrumbs. What if these aren't isolated events but parts of a larger sequence? What if we're being introduced to something in stages? Each object slightly more obvious than the last, each anomaly harder to ignore, and 3I Atlas might not be the end of that sequence. It might be the beginning of the reveal. One of the most overlooked clues about 3I Atlas isn't just what it emits or how it moves, but where it moves. As its orbit was mapped in greater detail, astronomers noticed something so improbable it felt scripted. The object's course brought it perfectly aligned with the orbital plane of the inner solar system, a flat, thin disk where all major planets rotate. That might sound minor, but it's statistically off the charts. Interstellar visitors should arrive at random inclinations with chaotic tilt angles, but 3I Atlas entered like a spacecraft targeting a solar survey. Its inclination? Just 0.14 degrees off the ecliptic. That's more aligned than most asteroids native to our system. It's like someone threw a dart across 30 trillion miles and hit the center of the bullseye. And in celestial dynamics, that level of precision isn't natural. It's navigated. This wasn't a rock flung by gravity. This was a decision executed in silence at cosmic scale. What if 3I Atlas isn't here to teach us anything, but to see what we do when faced with something unexplainable? That's the theory gaining traction among a growing minority of thinkers who believe this object is a kind of observational probe, not for data collection, but for psychological reflection. Consider it. It arrives in our system quietly. It doesn't emit signals. It doesn't land. It doesn't interact. It simply exists. But with just enough strangeness to force debate, division, curiosity. And suddenly, the scientific world splits. Some fight to explain it with outdated models. Others whisper artificial, but dare not publish. Meanwhile, public interest grows, and humanity reveals itself. Not to 3I Atlas, but through it. It's the perfect mirror, passive, inert, but deeply provocative. Not a teacher, not a weapon, just a test of how far we've come and whether we're ready to ask not what it is, but what it means that we even noticed it. One of the darkest whispers emerging from confidential analysis isn't about what James Webb saw, but about what it couldn't classify. According to leaked internal reports from 2 observatories, parts of 3I Atlas's spectral data don't match anything in current material databases, not just rare compounds. We're talking about spectral fingerprints with no earthly analogs, reflections at frequencies that suggest structures of matter we haven't synthesized, or maybe even theorized. Could it be alloys that don't form naturally in stars? Is this evidence of non-baryonic structures, matter engineered at the subatomic level? One physicist, under condition of anonymity, described it as a lattice of metal that doesn't make sense. It reflects like a solid but radiates like a plasma. That's not something nature builds. That's something intelligence assembles. And if that's true, we're not just looking at a visitor. We're looking at technology so far beyond ours it feels like magic. Perhaps the final nail in the "it's just a comet" coffin lies in the way 3I Atlas behaves as a body in space. Most comets rotate, tumble, wobble. They're chaotic, lopsided, spun by solar radiation and shaped by time. But this one? It's eerily stable. Its axis shows no measurable rotation. It's not tumbling, it's gliding, like a drone in atmosphere, like a satellite with active stabilization. That's virtually impossible for a natural body, especially one traveling at interstellar speeds for thousands of years. In other words, 3I Atlas isn't just weird, it's controlled. either by internal mechanics or by a physics we haven't even scratched. It's self-balancing, maintaining a steady vector through the system, as if resisting entropy itself. And that, more than anything else, might be the biggest clue of all. Because in space, chaos is easy, stillness is engineered. There's a limit to how many coincidences science can absorb before coincidence starts to look like cognition. And with 3I Atlas, that line has been crossed multiple times. Its emissions increase when telescopes align. Its brightness peaks during optimal observational windows. Its behavior appears reactive, not just to solar energy, but to our scrutiny, as if it can sense when it's being watched. That's not a poetic metaphor, it's what the data implies. The same instruments used to detect atmospheric changes on exoplanets are now suggesting that 3I Atlas may have a kind of feedback loop, something built into it that adjusts in real time. But what does that mean? Could it be scanning our technology, reacting to our attention, or worse, testing our reactions to it? This is no longer about what it's made of, it's about who it was made for. And maybe, just maybe, it was made for minds like ours. 3I Atlas isn't transmitting anything. No radio bursts, no laser pulses, no digital chatter. But that silence might not be the absence of communication. It might be the communication itself. In recent months, deep space monitors began comparing 3I Atlas's path to dozens of archived anomalies from the last 40 years. Strange flybys, unexplained outgassing events, rogue thermal signatures in the Kuiper belt. And what emerged is a chilling pattern. These events share temporal symmetry, spatial alignment, and energy echoes that form a kind of celestial lattice. One physicist described it as a quiet network, made not of signals, but positions. As if each object, each anomaly, is a node in a larger structure, a structure too large to see all at once. And 3I Atlas? It might be the activator, the final piece in a web we were never supposed to notice, until now. Behind closed doors, in private Slack groups, encrypted forums, and off-the-record conversations, a terrifying theory circulates among a very small circle of astronomers, astrophysicists, and military analysts. It's not just that 3I Atlas may be artificial. It's that it may be residual, a fragment, a detached component of something far larger, something that passed long ago. What if this object is debris, but not junk? What if it's the final breadcrumb of a technological event that already happened, one we missed? In this view, 3I Atlas is less a probe and more a fuse, a timed artifact that was programmed to awaken, to move, to reveal, now, not decades ago, not in the future, but at the exact moment our species became capable of understanding it. And if that's the case, then this isn't the beginning of the story, it's the epilogue of someone else's narrative. Carl Sagan once said, "The universe will remain silent until we are ready to hear it." But what if the silence was never empty? What if it was waiting? 3I Atlas doesn't roar, it whispers. It doesn't fly, it drifts with impossible grace. And yet, in every shift of its tail, every unexplained composition, every gravitational defiance, it speaks. Not in words, but in design. Not in logic, but in presence. What if we've never been alone, not because something is watching us, but because something left us a mirror, placed carefully into the void, to reflect our own capacity for curiosity, wonder, and fear. And now that we've noticed it, it no longer needs to hide. Because the moment we began to ask, to doubt, to study, that was the real trigger. That was the real contact. Not a transmission, not a message, just a question. Hanging in the dark, sharper than any blade. What are you willing to see when the sky stops pretending to be silent? Most comets disintegrate. They're fragile, celestial snowballs that fall apart as they near the sun. But 3I Atlas? It didn't break down, it hardened. Observations from JWST and the ALMA array indicate that, as it moved closer to solar radiation, its reflective profile increased, not decreased. Its surface temperature remained unexpectedly stable, and it showed no signs of fracturing. If anything, its nickel emissions became more consistent, like a regulated system adjusting itself. One astrophysicist put it bluntly, "This isn't how dead rocks behave. This is how protected structures behave. And that phrase, protected structures, is sticking. Because what if 3I Atlas wasn't built to explore? What if it was built to endure, to survive billions of years, to drift undisturbed, unnoticed, until a species clever enough finally saw it for what it really is, a survivor of something much, much older. As theories swirl around 3I Atlas, one of the most provocative is also the simplest, that this object is ancient, far beyond anything we can imagine, that it was built, not recently, not during our rise, but perhaps before Earth was even habitable. This idea emerges from the timing of its approach and the exactness of its orbital insertion. If true, it would mean that someone, or something, seeded the galaxy with artifacts meant to be found across eons, not across civilizations. And 3I Atlas may be just one of them. Imagine a message in a bottle tossed not into an ocean, but into the galactic tide, drifting between stars, passing lifeless systems, until it stumbled into one where minds had evolved just enough to ask, "Is this normal?" And in that moment of doubt, the bottle is opened. And the message is us, reacting, wondering, fearing, reaching. It waited for us to look. And now that we have, the countdown may have begun. Among the most tantalizing findings from JWST are not visual, but mathematical. The composition of 3I Atlas, when plotted as atomic ratios, revealed strange consistencies, repeating numerical patterns in isotopic weights, elemental pairings, and energy emissions. Patterns that resemble non-random encoding, not in language, but in physics itself. One team proposed that the object may be a kind of passive data cube, a structure whose material composition is the code, not to be transmitted, but to be decoded by those with enough knowledge of atomic structures and quantum physics. In other words, not a transmitter, but a physical book, written in the oldest language of all, matter. What's in it? We don't know. But if it's true, then this isn't just a visitor. It's an artifact, a record, perhaps a warning, or maybe an invitation. After months of observation, speculation, and silence, one final theory has emerged, one that doesn't look outward, but inward. What if 3I Atlas wasn't sent to be found? What if it was sent to find something? And what if that something is us? A test of perception, of pattern recognition, of curiosity, a filter not to communicate with all species, but only with the ones who see beyond the obvious. Not every civilization would notice an anomalous nickel ratio. Not every species would question orbital precision. But we did. We're doing it now. And in doing so, we may have just passed a test we didn't know we were taking. Maybe the object isn't just a mirror or a probe. Maybe it's a lock. And maybe our collective awakening, our attention, our fear, was the key. The question now is, what did we just unlock? We always believed that when contact came, it would be loud, flashing lights, a signal across the stars, something obvious, something human. But maybe we were wrong. Maybe contact was never about messages we could hear, but about patterns we could recognize. Maybe it was never about the loudest signal. Maybe it was about the quietest presence, something that waited, not to arrive, but to be noticed. 3. I Atlas didn't announce itself. It didn't demand our attention. It simply existed, just strange enough to be ignored by most, and unforgettable to those who dared to look closer. It's not what it is that terrifies us. It's how perfectly it fits into the shape of our curiosity. Nickel without iron, a tail without randomness, a path without chaos, and a presence without origin. No explosions, no signals. Just a question so old and so subtle, it could only be asked in silence. Have you evolved enough to see what doesn't want to be seen? Maybe this object isn't here to tell us anything. Maybe it's here to see if we're ready to listen. And maybe, just maybe, we were never meant to understand it. We were only meant to notice it. And now that we have, the silence of the universe has changed. Not louder, just different. Because now we're not alone anymore. We're aware.